Good evening, parents. Thank you so much for coming to our financial aid information. I'm just going to kind of duck down a little bit. My name is Heidi Cosgrove, and I am the 12th grade counselor, and it's been a wonderful senior year so far. I'm looking at a few of my seniors around here, and I absolutely love senior year. I love seeing where they start in the beginning of the fall to where they are now, and to when they graduate. And one of my students came in and said there was only about 21 more Mondays left until graduation. And I'm like, what? I know, isn't that crazy? So one thing we like to do to help with the college process is to bring in an expert regarding financial aid. And all of the colleges have financial aid admissions officers who are phenomenal at helping to address any financial aid questions. But we wanted to bring here to St. Louis Park a wonderful financial aid officer who is going to go quite in depth about the financial aid process. Thank you to Park TV for videotaping this. So hello to our viewers who are going to be watching this. And we'll also have it on YouTube for a link on the website because I know for me, if I'm learning something new, sometimes I have to watch it again to kind of grab the information and make sure that I understand it. And then we'll end with a question and answer session. And please don't hesitate to ask any questions because this is a complex process. And we would love to have as many questions as possible because we can also have it videotaped for future viewing as well. So do not hesitate to do that at all. Hopefully everybody for sure has picked up this white sheet, which is the presentation for tonight. So that's the most important piece to pick up. So does anybody maybe need pens or pencils that I could run up and grab? Okay, I can grab some more. All right, well, I would love to introduce to you for our financial aid presentation, wonderful woman from St. Kate's, Katie Bouts.
Thank you so much. Well, good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight. As Heidi said, my name's Katie Bouts. I'm the Associate Director of Admission and Financial Aid over at St. Kate's. I do all of the financial aid awarding for all of our incoming students, so that's all of our first-year freshman students and all of our transfer students. I've been doing financial aid for about 5 years now, and really happy to talk to you guys about the financial aid process. So just an agenda for this evening. We're going to talk about what is financial aid, and then we're going to go through the FAFSA. We have some screenshots of what the FAFSA looks like and kind of going through some of the more complex questions on there. And then we will also do some types of financial aid, talk about special circumstances and some other things. And then, as Heidi did say, we will have a portion at the end for Q&A. So we'll just go ahead and dive right in here. We always like to start out with this slide at St. Kate's because we like to talk about financial aid being a collaborative partnership between these three entities. So a little bit is on the state and the federal governments to put in their share of financial aid. A little bit is on the university to put in their financial aid through the form of scholarships. And then there's also a responsibility shared by the family, by the parent and the student. And this is kind of the traditional way we think of financial aid, these three legs on the milk stool kind of thing. So we want everyone to be aware that it's all of us working together to make sure your child can go to college and be able to pay for it and finance it. The goal of financial aid, sometimes it's good to take a step back and think about why we even have these things. The goal of financial aid is to assist students and families in paying for their education. And it is an investment. So how do we achieve this goal? We evaluate a family's ability to pay for the educational costs, and we evaluate it based on the FAFSA. We use the FAFSA because it allows us to distribute financial aid in an equitable manner. So as best we can, we try to level the playing field by asking all of the same questions of everyone who fills out the FAFSA. And we also want to achieve this financial aid goal by being able to balance gift aid, which is the free money that doesn't have to be repaid, and also balancing that with what we call self-help, which would be student loans and also work study, where the student is taking on a bit of responsibility there by either paying it back in the future or working through college. So the principles of needs analysis. So when we say needs analysis, we're really just talking about the FAFSA and the FAFSA calculation. So historically, and to the extent that they are able, parents are the primary people that we look to pay for college. So yay, isn't that exciting? So parents are primarily responsible. We do also work self-help aid into our financial aid packages. Pretty much all schools do, because the student is also responsible. It's the student's investment in their own education. So work study and loans are always a part of the financial aid package. And we also, with the needs analysis, we're trying to look at families in their present financial conditions. So not what their finances were 10 years ago or will be 10 years from now, but what does your current income look like? What do your current assets look like? You might have heard recently in the news about President Obama pushing through something called going to prior year income. So this is not going to affect the upcoming 16-17 year at all for the students who are seniors right now, but students who are juniors and sophomores will be filling out the FAFSA a little bit earlier. So normally the FAFSA is not available till January 1st, but beginning in fall of 2016, it's going to be available October 1st. So you can fill it out earlier, and you can use your prior year income. So your taxes will already be filed, and you won't have to estimate your income as much. So hopefully it'll make things easier for you, but it's still yet to be seen. It's still a lot of kinks to work out, I'm sure, but just wanted to throw that out there since I know we have parents of more than just seniors here in the audience. So where to start with financial aid? The FAFSA is always a good place to start. I'm just going to go through the FAFSA today, but there are a lot of other forms out there that some schools require. For instance, private schools might require a form called the CSS profile, and that is an online form through the College Board website, and it's going to go into a little bit more depth than the FAFSA. So just a warning to look at the schools that your student is applying to and check to see what they require for financial aid. Schools like St. Olaf, Carleton, some of the higher end private colleges will probably be asking for the CSS profile to be completed in addition to the FAFSA. Also, schools might have their own paper form or online form that they want you to fill out in addition to the FAFSA, so be on the lookout for that. But definitely do the FAFSA and send it to all the schools that you're going to be applying to. So you're going to go to FAFSA.gov to do the FAFSA. FAFSA.com exists, and sometimes people will go there and try to fill it out, and then they'll ask you to pay for filling out the FAFSA. The FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid, so do not be duped by that and do not pay to fill out a FAFSA. Just go straight to FAFSA.gov to fill out your FAFSA. It's helpful to have these items when you're going to be filling out the FAFSA. It's your 2015 taxes, which might not be done till April 15th, so estimates are fine. But you might have your W-2s available, so you can certainly use those. And you're gonna, for parents who have students who are seniors right now, you're gonna wanna do the 16-17 FAFSA, which is not available until January 1st. So hang on to this presentation and keep this in your mind until January 1st, and then you can run to your computer as soon as the clock strikes midnight on January 1st. For those of you who have filled out a FAFSA before, you might remember, maybe you have a older child that's already done this, you might remember having a PIN number to sign the FAFSA. As of May 1st of last year, they got rid of the PIN number, so they now have something called a Federal Student Aid User ID. So they've switched to a username and password system, so no more remembering a 4-digit PIN number to sign your FAFSA. When you go to the FAFSA, you'll be prompted to create this FSA User ID. The student will create one, and one of the parents, a parent, will need to complete one too, because the FAFSA needs to be electronically signed by both the student and a parent. So both parent and student will create these when you log into the FAFSA and start the application. So jumping right into the FAFSA here, you can see a screenshot of what it looks like. So you're going to start by filling out the student demographic information, social security number, date of birth. You're going to want to enter your student's name exactly how it appears on their social security card. And then if your student is male, they will be asked to sign up for selective service. I know it's super outdated, but it's still a requirement on the FAFSA for male students. And you can see there on the left side, we've circled the word student, and we just kind of want to point out a few things. When you're filling out the FAFSA, you're going to be asked questions that are pertaining to the student, and then you're going to be asked questions that are pertaining to the parents. So it's good to look on the side there to see which section you're filling out and whose information you want to be putting on that particular page. So the student information, just a couple more things to tell you about here. Students are going to need to file a FAFSA every single year in order to continue to receive financial aid. If your student is just receiving merit scholarships from this school, they probably won't require the FAFSA to have your merit scholarship renewed, but if you want to continue receiving that need-based financial aid, like grants and loans and work study, you will need to do a FAFSA each year. And you just want to make sure that you complete the correct aid year. So for seniors, it's going to be the 16-17. Don't fill out, the 15-16 will be available when you go to fill out your FAFSA, but make sure you do the 16-17. You want to do the year in which they're going to start college. Here's another screenshot of the FAFSA. So a few of the first questions that will be asked of the student they'll want to determine the dependency status of the student. So it's a list of questions, asking, are you married? Are you over the age of 24? Things like that, that the Department of Education has determined that makes a student independent. Just filing their own tax return or living outside your home is not enough to make them independent. It's a pretty high bar to jump, actually. So any of these items here, these are the criteria for being an independent student. And when I say independent student, that would mean that you don't provide parent information on the FAFSA. So the majority of our first-year students, or the majority of all first-year students, are dependent students and will want to provide parent info on the FAFSA, or will be required to provide parent info. So after we've determined the dependency status, it will go into the student income information. So it will ask the student if they've filed taxes. Maybe they didn't file taxes, but they did work and they earned $500. You'd want to put that in there, even though they didn't file taxes. And then it will also ask questions about the assets for the student. So they're just going to ask what your cash or checking or savings account is on that day in that moment, just a brief snapshot of what it looks like. And then it also asks about student investments. We'll kind of go into a little more detail on that when we get to the parent side of it, because there's more things going on there. But you do start with all the student questions first, and then it comes time to enter the parent information. So as we said, dependent students will need to provide parent information on the FAFSA. If the parent information is not available for whatever reason, the student should contact the schools that they're applying to about how to proceed. Sometimes they want a special form to be filled out, or extra documentation is needed sometimes to clarify that. So parent information, these are a couple of situations that people get tripped up on. So who's a parent and which parents go on it, if a student maybe has a biological parent and a step parent, or two step parents, or what's going on with that. So if the student's biological parents are divorced, you want to include the information for the custodial parent. And the custodial parent is defined as the parent who the student lives with for more than 50% of the year. If the student truly spends 50% of their time with each parent, then it would be which parent provides more support, and that really just comes down to which parent makes more money. If the custodial parent, so the custodial parent, if they are remarried, the step parent that they are remarried to, the spouse of that custodial parent, also needs to be included on the FAFSA. So if they are legally married, both the custodial parent and that step parent will both be on the FAFSA as the two parents for that child. Let's see. Unmarried parents who live together. Sometimes we have parents who just choose to never marry, or they just never marry. So in that case, we still need both parents' incomes on the FAFSA. You might not file your taxes jointly, but you're just going to have to do some math and take two tax returns and add the information together. And these are statuses that you'll select when you. A question on the FAFSA is parent marital status, and one of them is married, so you'll provide both parent information. One of them is unmarried and living together, so in this case, you'll still provide both parents' information. You'll just have to add them together from the two tax returns. Household size is another question that trips up some families sometimes. Who to include in your household and who not to include. So household size is defined as the number of people the parents provide more than 50% of financial support between, for the 16-17 FAFSA, it's going to be July 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2017. So think about who's going to be in your household during that time. Let's say you have someone who is a senior in college, they're 22, they're in your household right now, you're supporting them, you're paying for their college, but they're graduating from college in May 2016, and they've already got a job lined up, and they're moving to Philadelphia, and they're going to be supporting themselves, and they're out of your household. That person should not be included in your household size for 16-17. It will also ask you the number in college, and parents are not counted in the number in college. It's just asking for how many dependents, how many students are in college. And this is the same thing. Think about who's going to be in college for the 16-17 year. So if you have a student who, like the same example, the 22-year-old who's going to graduate from college in May 2016, she's no longer in college, she's no longer in your household, she's not counted at all. So just some good reminders about how to do the household size. And then we're on to the parent income information. It's going to ask for some income tax questions, your AGI, things that are going to be plucked right off of your tax return. So it's really helpful to have your tax return out while you're doing the FAFSA. And you can just, it will tell you hints, like it'll tell you which line on your tax return to look at. So for income tax on your 1040 form, look at line 55 and enter that into your FAFSA. Something that you can do that would make your life easier if you've already filed taxes, and this might not be a tool that's available for you if you're gonna do the FAFSA in January or February before your taxes are done. But if your taxes are done and you've filed them with the IRS and it's been at least 2 or 3 weeks, let me just skip ahead here real quick. You can do this data retrieval tool. So if your taxes are filed with the IRS and it's been at least 2 to 3 weeks, you can use this data retrieval tool, and they will transfer all of the tax information that the FAFSA needs directly from your tax return. So I guess we'll get into that in a little more detail in just a second. So we'll go back here. But if you haven't filed your tax returns yet, feel free to use your 2014 tax return that's been completed last year and use that as an estimate. Unless your income fluctuates really greatly from year to year, the previous year estimate is usually just fine for the first time you fill out the FAFSA. And then once your tax returns are completed, you can go back to your FAFSA, log in, and update it with the new information, or use that IRS data retrieval tool. Parent income information. So in addition to looking at the tax information, it will also ask for untaxed income and other financial information that's not going to be on your tax return. Education credits are on your tax return, and this is, if you have another child in college and you got that tax deduction, that's something that you can use to reduce your income that the FAFSA will ask you about. And then child support. So you would want to document if you've either paid child support or received child support. So if you're receiving it, it counts as income in the FAFSA calculation, so that will need to be on the FAFSA. And if you're paying it out, we are aware that you're paying that out, and we want to reduce your total income by that amount. So you want to put your paid child support on there as well. And then taxable combat pay or special combat pay are also questions on there. And then the parents' own student grants and scholarships if it was reported as part of your EGI. So those last two don't really apply to a whole lot of families, but it is a question out there. Parent asset information. So as we talked about before, it is going to ask you for your current balance in your cash, savings, and checkings accounts. So you can log into your accounts real fast and see what the current balance is. And it really just wants a snapshot of what it is on kind of an average daily basis. And then your net value of investments, value minus any debt. So this question can trip up a lot of people because they'll want to put in things that they should not be including. So something that you should not include, or things that you should not include, are the value of your home, your primary home that you live at the majority of the year. You should also not include any savings in specified retirement accounts. So FAFSA wants to recognize that those are for retirement, and they don't expect you to use your retirement savings as part of the calculation for financial aid. And then one of the questions is also the value of any business that you hold. And again, very few people will that question apply to, because they only want to know about your business if you have more than 100 employees. So if you have more than 100 employees, you're going to need to put it on there. If you have fewer than that, which the majority of small businesses that everyday people have is fewer than 100 people, you do not need to include any kind of business investment or business savings on the FAFSA. When they are asking about investments, so they're not talking about your house, they're not talking about your retirement, and they're not talking about your business assets, what are they talking about? It's usually going to be other investments like stocks and bonds, and then if you have any other real estate that is not your family's primary home. So if you own a second property and you rent it out, or if you just own a vacation home, you will need to put that in the investment section minus any debt on that. And also included in there that I didn't mention are the college savings plans. So those 529 savings plans will want to go here. Make sure that you put it in the parent section for the parent assets and not the student asset section. It might be in the student's name because it's for the student, but we want to count it as a parent asset because the parent assets are not counted as heavily in the calculation. Yes, so. So again, with the data retrieval tool, if you cannot use the data retrieval tool if any of these situations apply to you. So married couples who file separate tax returns, they're not able to pull in more than one tax return. So if you file married filings separately, it's not an option for you. Students whose parents are unmarried or living together, again, we can't pull in two different tax returns. You'll have to add those two together yourself. And then if you've filed an amended tax return, a 1040X form, or if you filed a Puerto Rican or foreign tax return, the IRS data retrieval tool is not available. But if it is available and you've done your tax forms, as we've said, and you've submitted them electronically, within 2 to 3 weeks, you'll be able to use the data retrieval tool and transfer it in. Let's see here. So I got the laser working here. So right here it says you, the parents, may be able to use the IRS data retrieval tool to view or to transfer your information from the IRS. So you're going to want to check off your filing status, and then it'll take you out to the IRS website to do the transfer. And then I also want to mention that if you did file your taxes by mailing them in the paper form, it is going to take a little bit longer. It's going to take 8 to 11 weeks before you can use the IRS data retrieval. So these are the items that that come over from the IRS when you do the data retrieval tool. So it's kind of a nice thing since you don't have to find these things on your tax return and enter them in, and it saves you some time. And this is what the screenshots look like. So when you click on the IRS, yes, I want to transfer my data, you'll get this pop-up that says you're leaving the FAFSA website, and you're going to say, okay, because you want to go out to the IRS and you want to verify your information, verify your address and your date of birth, and hit submit, and it will, and that's what you want to do. So a lot of people skip that step of actually going out to the IRS website, but that will transfer your information in. So after you've entered the student information and the parent information, you're pretty much done with your FAFSA. You just need to select which schools you want to send it to. You can enter up to 10 school codes. So you can either search for the school code by name and state of the college, or you could go look at the website for the schools you're applying to find their FAFSA school code. Sometimes that's a good idea if it's a common name like St. John's University. There's probably at least 5 of those out there, I think. So just make sure you're typing in the right school code so your FAFSA gets sent to the correct school. You can enter up to 10. So if your student is applying to more than 10, you're going to want to send it to the first 10. Let it wait about 3 to 5 days, let everything process, make sure the schools can get the FAFSA transaction, or you can even call the school and say, hey, did you get my FAFSA? And double check that. And then you can go back to your FAFSA and delete those 10 schools and put in the other 2 or 3 that you need to send them to, and hit submit again. And one more thing I'll say too is that they do ask for your housing choice for each college that you're sending it to, because depending on whether you're living on campus or with your parents, that will determine your financial aid award as well. So here's our FAFSA signature page. After you select your schools, it will ask you to electronically sign your FAFSA with your FSA user ID that you created. So username and password. It's probably a good idea to write those down and keep them in a safe place so that when you do your FAFSA next year, you can remember what it is and not go through the I forgot my password process. And success, we have done a FAFSA. So this is something that you'll get once your FAFSA is complete. The circled thing at the top there is the data release number, DRN. It's a 4-digit number, so if for whatever reason the school doesn't get your FAFSA, you can give them this number, and that will give them access to your FAFSA. So probably a good chance that you won't need it, but if you do, know it's there. And then in the bottom left corner, you'll see the estimated expected family contribution, your EFC. So that's the calculation result from your FAFSA, and we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in a moment. And then, so it'll also tell you what happens next, and if there was anything wrong with your FAFSA or anything that you need to, double check, it will also give you a message there when you've done the FAFSA. So this is a good page to print off. They'll also email it to you. They'll email you the FAFSA results in the form of a student aid report, which we call a SAR. So that's going to get emailed to the student by the email they put in when they filled out the FAFSA. And like I said before, you can always return to your FAFSA and make changes. So if you filled it out with estimated data, you can go back and use the IRS data retrieval or update it with your newly filed tax information or add more school codes. You just need your user ID and password to get in there and make changes. Verification. So this is a process that is required by the Department of Education. So roughly 1 in 3 students will be selected for a process called verification, and schools are required to complete this if they want to continue to receive federal financial aid. So what it is we are required to make sure that your tax information matches what you put on the FAFSA. So what schools will need to do is collect copies of your tax return, collect other forms that they might require, and go through and verify that your FAFSA data is correct. And they need to do that before the financial aid will be dispersed to the student. So like I said, you might need to submit some additional documentation to the school. It's not a bad thing. It's not like you've been flagged for a bad reason or anything. It's just a check and balance that we're required to go through. I will tell you that if you do the data retrieval tool, you are much less likely to get selected for verification because they know that your tax data has been directly transferred from the IRS. So that's another plus to doing the data retrieval tool. And then sometimes students will need to bring in their citizenship documentation. Again, not common either, but in this case, for students who are selected for this, you do need to physically bring in your passport or your certificate of naturalization to the financial aid office. We can't accept photocopies of it anymore, so just so you know, if you get selected for that, again, it's not a bad thing, just something we're required to check. So back to the EFC, our expected family contribution. So this is what's determined by the FAFSA. So those are all the things that you put into your FAFSA. You let them know your parent income, your student income, your family size, the number in college, your assets, and any untaxed income. So those are all the things that go into calculating the EFC. And then the EFC comes out, and that's just kind of an index that the Department of Education uses as your ability to pay for college each year, kind of. A chart that I'll show on the next couple slides here, we just want to get the point across that your EFC will stay the same at every single school that you send it to. The cost of attendance for each school that your student applies to will differ. So that means that you could be eligible for different amounts of financial aid depending on which school you're applying to. But the EFC will remain constant. So as we see here, we've got the cost of a public 4-year, a public 2-year, and a private 4-year college up here. Let's assume a $5,000 EFC. You can see the cost of attendance differ. The $5,000 EFC is the same everywhere because it was the same FAFSA that was submitted. And you can see when we say need, financial need, that's the financial aid you're eligible to receive. And you can see that a public 2-year college, you're not eligible for as much financial aid there because their costs are less. Same thing with the difference between the public 4-year and the private 4-year. The more expensive the college is, the needier you're going to be, the more financial aid you will be eligible for because the cost is higher. While we're talking about costs, it's good to remind people what we mean when we say cost of attendance or tuition. So some people just talk about tuition this, tuition that, but tuition sometimes is only half of the cost if you're thinking of living on campus, or sometimes even the fees are more than the tuition, depending on what school you're looking at. So we at St. Kate's kind of like to break it down into cost of attendance and then direct costs. So we define direct costs as the costs that you will have to pay to the university. So what is going to be on your student's bill? So direct costs are going to be your tuition, your fees, and if the student is living on campus, it'll be the room and board. And those are your direct costs, so that's what you're paying directly to the university. College is probably more than those just those direct costs, though. We can take into account the entire cost of attendance, so living expenses, transportation, books and supplies, those kind of things can be factored into the school's overall cost of attendance. So it's a good idea when you do get your financial aid awards back from the places where your student has been admitted. It's a good idea to make sure when you're comparing those financial aid awards that you're comparing apples to apples. Don't be comparing the cost of attendance minus financial aid at one school to the direct costs minus the financial aid at another school. You just want to make sure that we're talking about the same kind of things when it comes to those discussions. And the other thing too is with those three, the transportation, books and supplies, those are going to be estimated at colleges, so they're going to vary. There's no really a good way to nail down a firm number with those. But again, those are expenses that you'll pay for out of pocket to the bookstore or to Amazon.com. You won't be paying those directly to the university. So we'll get into types of financial aid now. So we kind of break it down into 4 categories. We've got grants and scholarships. These are the 2 thumbs up ones we like. These are the free money, gift aid. Does not need to be repaid at any point in time. Then we have loans. So loans, aid that's given to you right now with the agreement that you will pay it back after you've graduated. And then student employment, work study. So this is both the state of Minnesota and the federal government have work study funds where the student is paid by the state or the federal work study program to work on campus and earn a paycheck. And that paycheck can either go toward their bill or just toward their living expenses. It's kind of up to them what they do with that. So those are the 4 core areas of the types of financial aid we have. Here's some examples of the federal grants that are available. Pell Grant, your EFC would have to be below about $5,000 or so to receive the Pell Grant. It is for lower income families. Same with the federal SEOG, low EFC Pell Grant recipients. The funding is limited, so the SEOG amount might vary from college to college. And then Teach Grant. I don't really like to include Teach Grant in the grant section all the time because it's a grant for 4 years and then it could turn into a loan if you aren't careful. So this is available to students who are education majors, and there is some service requirements that go along with it. So you do need to teach for a certain amount of years in a high need area that needs teachers and that kind of thing, and I think it's like 4 or 5 years. I don't know all the details off the top of my head, but if those requirements aren't met and you're not super careful about that, your grant gets retroactively turned into an unsubsidized loan and the interest gets compounded on it immediately. So it is available for education majors, so it is a good thing if you are super set on being a teacher or educator, but if you're not so sure, it might not be the best form of financial aid. Then we have state grants. So these are all of the grants that are available through the state of Minnesota. You'll get reviewed for you'll get reviewed for the first one just by doing the FAFSA, the Minnesota State Grant. And then the next 3 will require a special application that you can get on the Minnesota Office of Higher Education website. So the Minnesota Indian Scholarship might apply to you if you're at least a quarter American Indian. Child care grant based on the income and household size, and then the Minnesota GI Bill for military service. The Minnesota DREAM Act, so this is available for students who have attended Minnesota high school and do not have a social security number, so they cannot do the FAFSA. So they are not eligible for federal aid, but they are eligible for state aid. So these students can still get aid through the state of Minnesota through the state grant program. They would just need to, again, they can't do the FAFSA and not eligible for federal aid, but they would just need to do the application online here through the Minnesota Office of Higher Education through the DREAM Act. They will fill out a application that's very similar to the FAFSA on the Minnesota website. We always encourage students to search for outside scholarships. There are a ton of them out there. A lot of times students will do this after they've gotten their financial aid award and they realize they need more scholarship. And at that point, a lot of the deadlines have already passed. So I would encourage your students to look for outside scholarships right now if they can. December and January are when a lot of the deadlines are. There's lots of places you can look. I'm sure that there are resources in the college counseling office, I'm sure, here at St. Louis Park. Searching on the web, there's websites like FastWeb Scholarships. The College Board also has a scholarship search engine. St. Kate's has a listing of outside awards. Even if you're not going to St. Kate's, I encourage you to go look at it. We constantly get emails from people saying, we have this scholarship, can you let students know about it? So someone in our office compiles that into a list and keeps it updated with the deadlines and everything. So that's on our financial aid website if you want to take a look at those. And then parent-employers, sometimes employers give benefits for dependents who are attending college, so it's always good to check with that.